This is a CBS News special report. I'm John Dickerson in New York. President Trump is about to speak at the White House, his first comments since canceling plans for a summit meeting with North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un.
I'd like to begin by saying that based on the recent statement of North Korea, I have decided to terminate the planned summit in Singapore on June 12th. While many things can happen and a great opportunity lies ahead potentially, I believe that this is a tremendous setback for North Korea and indeed a setback for the world. I've spoken to General Mattis and the Joint Chiefs of Staff and our military, which is by far the most powerful anywhere in the world, that has been greatly enhanced recently, as you all know, is ready if necessary. Likewise, I have spoken to South Korea and Japan, and they are not only ready should foolish or reckless acts be taken by North Korea, but they are willing to shoulder much of the cost of any financial burden, any of the costs associated by the United States in operations if such an unfortunate situation is forced upon us. Hopefully, positive things will be taking place with respect to the future of North Korea. But if they don't, we are more ready than we have ever been before. North Korea has the opportunity to end decades of poverty and oppression by following the path of denuclearization and joining the community of nations. And I hope that Kim Jong Un will ultimately do what is right, not only for himself, but perhaps most importantly, what's right for his people, who are suffering greatly and needlessly. All of the Korean people, North and South, deserve to be able to live together in harmony, prosperity, and peace. That bright and beautiful future can only happen when the threat of nuclear weapons is removed. No way it can happen otherwise. If and when Kim Jong Un chooses to engage in constructive dialogue and actions, I am waiting. In the meantime, our very strong sanctions, by far the strongest sanctions ever imposed, and maximum pressure campaign will continue, as it has been continuing. But no matter what happens and what we do, we will never, ever compromise the safety and security of the United States of America. I want to make that statement, feel very, very strongly about it. Our military, as you know, has been greatly enhanced, will soon be at a level that it's never been before. Our approval of $700 billion this year and $716 billion next year, largely due to the help of a lot of the people with me today and standing right here. We appreciate. But we had to do that for our military, and we've done it, and hopefully everything's going to work out well with North Korea. And a lot of things can happen, including the fact that perhaps, and would wait, it's possible that the existing summit could take place or a summit at some later date. Nobody should be anxious. We have to get it right. Okay. With that being said, we have something else, which I have to tell you, all of you, Chairman, Mike, and everybody, it was a big deal until this came up. I don't know. Where's Mike Crapo? Where are you? Mike, Congratulations.
The president there in the Roosevelt room. He said that the opportunity lies ahead potentially, but then spoke about having gotten in touch with his Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs, and said that the military was ready and that allies in the region would pick up the cost if there was any military action. We want to go now to Major Garrett, who is at the White House. Major, the president also said to Kim Jong Un, "I am waiting," and he said nobody should be anxious, speaking, of course, to Americans.
Well, it should be anxious. We want to get this right. A couple of things worth pointing out about that last statement. We want to get this right. John, it is clear at the White House, has been all week, that there was a sense internally that not only were the North Koreans backing away, but that the administration itself needed a bit more time to prepare adequately. The new National Security Advisor, John Bolton, doesn't have his team fully prepared here at the White House. Similarly, at the State Department, Mike Pompeo was building his team. It would have been an enormous task for both of those teams to organize themselves rapidly enough and effectively enough to carry on the high-level and high-intensity negotiations contemplated even before the scheduled June 12th summit. So getting it right became an important factor for this administration, separate from the North Korean statements, which were clearly bellicose and harmful. One other thing it's worth pointing out, the president, by talking first about the U.S. military and consulting his military advisors, even before mentioning conversations with the South Korean and Japanese government, is sending a signal to the North Koreans that this president believes it has been that threat of military action in a way that no previous American president has so publicly stated that drove Kim Jong Un to the precipice of this summit in the first place. That's the president's belief. Whether or not the North Koreans share that, we don't know. But it is now going back to where the president was before the summit was possible. We are going to threaten you with military activity. If you don't abandon your nuclear weapons program, that is a real prospect. So we're now back to where we were 3 or 4 months ago, the implication being the rhetoric may heat up and the sense of anxiety, regardless of what the president just told the country, is likely to increase.
That's right. The president said people shouldn't get anxious, but he also said we are more ready than we have ever been before, speaking of military readiness. Major, put your finger on it, if it's possible. What caused this? You mentioned the bellicose language, but the Secretary of State also said, Mike Pompeo said, that the North Koreans weren't responding to the preparations needed for this actual summit on the 12th. So what was the proximate cause for this calling off of the summit?
I don't think it would be accurate to identify a single cause, but there were several. The lack of preparations, the lack of visible seriousness on the part of North Koreans, the increasing unease on the part of the administration about whether or not they would show up, and if they did, would they have anything really serious to talk about. And the rhetoric from the North Koreans can't be discounted. Vice President Pence holds a special place in the Trump world. President Trump regards him highly. Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, does as well. And when the North Koreans call him a political dummy, well, that's the kind of insult that no administration can ignore, least of all this one. And when the North Koreans at least imply that there could be some sort of nuclear conflict, it's one, John, we should point out, at least in regards to the United States, the North Koreans are incapable of waging. Yes, they possess nuclear weapons, but they do not possess the intercontinental ballistic missile technology necessary to deliver them to the mainland. Nevertheless, that rhetoric cannot be ignored. And in the context of all this shifting sense of how real or unreal these talks might be, that was probably the most convenient off-ramp for the president. And it's worth noting, John, this president has often said about deals in general, sometimes it's important to walk away. He's walking away to see if these can be restarted in a different context and possibly at a different time.
Let me pick up on that quickly, Major, that point of walking away. This president is a negotiator. He ran for office on that. Give us your sense, though. You know the history of these things. They're not often negotiated in public. This one has been quite public. The president's been engaged. How has that affected the way this has gone forward?
Well, the president jumped a lot of typical processes by agreeing to this summit before he had a team ready to negotiate the underlying details and had any sense of what was achievable. That is different. This president does many things at the presidential level that are very different. What is most important to conclude, though, is though that was a different technique and sort of jumped way ahead of the process, either at the State Department, Pentagon, or National Security Council, the results for this country and this administration bear a stark and striking resemblance to previous administrations. Engagement with North Koreans that appears promising, only to end in disappointment and frustration.
All right, Major Garrett, I want to bring in CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who is with us. Ed, what do you make of this?
Look, he's operating here from a position of strength. This is somebody who has total control over foreign policy. This was a decision he made on his own. And with everything that happens in this presidency, it came in dramatic fashion. There was a letter released this morning by the White House that reads like an emotional breakup letter. The problem is it has global ramifications. Reading just from one part of it here, in one sentence, he says, "You talk about your nuclear capabilities, but ours are so massive and powerful that I pray to God they will never have to be used." In the next sentence, however, "I felt a wonderful dialogue was building up between you and me, and ultimately it is only that dialogue that matters. Someday, I look very much forward to meeting you." So you can see sort of the yin and the yang there, trying to be tough, but also leaving open the door to possibly doing this again.
That's right, and even in his remarks here today, he said the summit might happen either at the date or in a future date. Ed O'Keefe, thanks so much. Coverage will continue throughout our day on your local news station and on this CBS station, and on our 24-hour streaming network, CBSN. Watch it at cbsnews.com, and we'll have a full wrap-up tonight on the CBS Evening News with Jeff Glor. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm John Dickerson, CBS News, New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com.